So there are two lines at the airport when you land after an international flight. There is the US citizens line, or the express lane, as I like to call it, and then there's the alien/visitors line that usually takes around 3 times as long. So around 5 years ago, my wife and I were coming back from England. We'd been visiting my family back there, and we landed in Chicago Airport. Now, we'd recently married. I'd applied for my green card, but it hadn't come yet. It wouldn't actually come for about a year. And so I was in this weird student visa application pending limbo. So she zipped on through to the express lane when we landed, and I got waiting in the world's slowest moving line. About 45 minutes later, I finally reached the border agent. This is always a less than pleasant experience. Shout out to border agents out there. I know your job's tough, but they never smile. They never make small talk. They won't ever tell you what they're reading or what they're typing. Usually they just ask me the usual questions, and he did today. Why are you here? I live here. I've applied for my green card. It hasn't come yet. How long do you plan to be here? Indefinitely. And where is home for you? Milwaukee. Now, usually this line of questioning ends with a grunt, a stamp of my documents, and a welcome to the USA. But this day was different. He grabbed my documents, he opened the booth, he walked out, and he said, "Follow me." So I followed. "Is everything okay?" "Follow me," he said. We got onto an elevator, and he took me down to a room that looked suspiciously like the waiting area of a jail cell. There was one big desk in the middle of the room where a man sat with a badge, a gun, and a stack of papers overlooking rows and rows of uncomfortable-looking red chairs. He walked me to one of the red chairs, and he said, "Sit down, wait here." He passed my documents to the man at the desk, and then he left, and I'd never see him again. At this point, my mind started to turn to my wife. You know, she's usually used to waiting for me, but I imagine she's starting to freak out at this point. So I stand up, and I pull out my phone, and I go to text her. "Turn off the phone, sit down," says the man at the desk. I'm like, "Oh no, don't worry, I'm just texting my wife." "Turn off the phone, sit down," he yells, and makes a slight kind of jerky motion towards the gun on his hip. I'm not a huge fan of guns. I'm uncomfortable even seeing them on law enforcement. When I was growing up, the only time I would ever see a gun was in a Hollywood movie, ironically being brandished by European terrorists. So at this point, I turned off my phone and I sat down. I glanced to my right, and I saw a young Asian woman, about 19 years old. Her hair and her clothes were disheveled. She was barefoot, which I found strange because it was January, and she seemed like she'd long given up crying. To my left was an Arabic family. There was a man who sat with a just dejected look on his face, while what I imagine was the mother tried to calm down 2 children who were crying and asking in their American accents why they couldn't go outside. Up at the desk was a young lad in a Columbia soccer jersey who was pleading with the officer, and I didn't hear everything, but all I heard the officer say was, "Make whatever calls you need to make, but you won't be getting on this plane today. The only way you're leaving this room, you won't be entering the country today. The only way you're leaving this room is to get on a plane back home." And his response was heartbreaking. He just said, "But this is home." So at this point, I start to panic, and the gravity of my situation started to dawn on me. I was trapped. I couldn't leave this room. I couldn't call my wife. I might not be able to leave this room except to get on the plane back home. I might not see my wife again for a very long time. I'd have to find a new job and find a way to pay bills and buy food and find a place to stay. I felt like my freedom had been taken away from me without notice or explanation, and I felt oppressed. I felt like a prisoner. After about an hour, the man at the desk called me up, and he asked me the usual questions. He said, "Why are you here?" "I live here. I live in Milwaukee. I've applied for a green card. I'm waiting for it." "How long do you plan to be here?" "Indefinitely." "Where's home for you?" "Milwaukee." He looked at me, back at my documents, back at me, back at my documents. He grunted, he stamped my documents, said, "Welcome to the USA," and showed me to the door. I ran out, ran across the concourse, finally got to the gate just as they were shutting the door, connected with my wife, and collapsed on the plane, ready to fly back to Milwaukee. Same thing when I got back to the apartment. I walked straight in, dumped my suitcase in the hallway, and collapsed in bed. I was exhausted, but I was relieved. And then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. You see, this was the first time in my life that I'd really felt oppressed, but it was a moment of oppression that was also seeped in privilege, because I was able to walk out of the room and go back to where I called home. So I allowed my mind to wander back to the others in that room, the Asian girl, the Arabic family, and the young lad in the Columbia soccer jersey, and I wanted to ask them the usual questions. Why are they here? How long do they hope to be able to stay here? And then where do they call home?